Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about how not adopting to the latest trends in workforce flexibility might be killing your company. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Jones Loflin. Welcome, Jones.
Thank you, Jen. It's a pleasure to be with you today to talk about this topic. I love the idea of breathing life because a lot of people feel like they're breathless in the
Mm,
workplace today.
absolutely. Can you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. My background is I'm a former classroom teacher, and after doing that for a few years, I left to pursue professional speaking and training around the focus point of time management and work-life success, or we might call work-life balance. Done a lot of work there over the years, continue to hone and sharpen my message and learn new things. Actually spent a little time as a trainer for the best-selling book, Who Moved My Cheese, which some of your listeners will remember from a few years ago. Went on to write a few of my own books. And so really, I just continue to work with audiences around the topics of leadership, work-life success, motivation, and then also have a coaching practice on the side where I help people with some of those same opportunities in their work and life.
That's great. And you mentioned work-life success a couple of times. So is there something different between that and work-life balance?
Love that question. To me, work-life balance implies that you've got to take away from one to get to the other. And while that's true from a time perspective, you're always putting them in tension with each other. And I don't necessarily think they have to be in tension. I think it's about being present in the moment. Where do you need to be investing your time in this moment? And so I try to stay away from the balance word a little bit because it just implies that you're going to reach a static state when things aren't changing. And your life is always changing. The workplace is always changing. So I don't think that's necessarily the safest approach to use.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, I think I've heard people talk about like there's just different moments of even maybe flow, like where you have to
Mm,
put more time into work and it's a very intensive time at work, or then maybe you get to put more time into family and it's just about adapting to the needs of the moment. And I suppose there's
yep.
times where they do come in conflict where something really stressful is going on at work and with family. And I think that's a little bit of what we might be talking about today is like as an employer, what's your mentality supposed to be like when in this new world when people's, personal life is colliding with their professional life.
Sure. One of the most important things that I think an employer has to do is be in touch with, what are their team members, what are their employees, what are they looking for, what are they trying to accomplish, be having great clarity around the expectations that you have for them and the jobs they're doing. What are their expectations in the type of work environment that will help them be at their best? Now, granted, the work has got to get done. There's no question. It's just being clear on how that work gets done, I think, is important. You've heard the cliche so many times. So many people manage by hours instead of outcomes.
Mm.
And being specific about what is the outcome of the work that you want every person on your team doing, and then you can begin to have the conversations about what does that look like? Where does the work need to get done? What are the deadlines that need to be established so that work can get done in a timely manner? So I think that's a great place for employers to start, is making sure they've got super clarity about what they expect of their team members and kind of getting the pulse of how the team members are thinking they would like to get the work done.
But what's then, I guess, the responsibility of the team members? I guess what comes to mind is, there's a lot of companies who have like unlimited leave now, right? And that can be taken advantage of. I know there was
Mhm.
a group out of, well, they were out of, I think, Colorado, but they're Colorado and Canadian or something. But
Mhm.
they had some sort of unlimited leave policy, and yeah, it can work with very outcome based, but it seems like that only works if people are accountable or something to the work that needs to be done.
Yes. Yes, you said it perfectly. There has to be that accountability there. There has to be clarity around what we're creating. What's the outcome of the work that they're doing? And that's harder these days, right? I mean, it was a lot easier when we were creating widgets, but we're not creating widgets anymore. It's knowledge based, and it's creation of content and different things like that. So I think there has to be that clarity, which includes deadlines and expectations, to help diminish the or offset the challenge of saying, hey, yeah, you have unlimited leave, but wait a minute, the work didn't get done.
Mm,
You have to establish those clear expectations and agreement. The employer and the employees work together to say, okay, we agree to this. Okay, now let's get started. And then from there, one of the things that I see so often is that we don't managers, supervisors, directors don't necessarily check in with those team members as often as they should, especially if you're in a remote work environment. There's not the accountability put in place. And accountability is not a negative thing. Accountability can be a positive thing.
mm,
It should be a positive thing, as you know. But
absolutely.
it's checking in with them, making
Mm,
those touch points. Okay, how is it going with this? Where are you with this? Because if not, sometimes you may have people who um, or procrastinate for whatever reasons, aren't getting the work done, and then they rush at the last minute, and then the employer is not happy with the quality of work that the employee produced. So I think there's a lot of
mm,
guidelines and other things that have to be put in place to make sure that people don't take advantage of things like unlimited leave.
mm. What do you, I guess, though, how do you, what would you say to leaders when you come into challenges of um, like, what do those conversations look like if people are taking advantage of it? Like, how does the leader approach that with the team without,
Mm.
coming across as I don't care about what's important to you?
Yeah, I think the first step, and there's a great book called it's by Jonathan Raymond. It's called Good Authority. I knew I'd get to it somewhere. It's Good Authority, where he talks about the proactive approach to accountability, and he talks about in there is that the first time you notice something isn't going as it should. Let's say you've got this team member who's got a deadline to get to, and you're noticing that they're not hitting a couple of um, the smaller steps in the process, smaller goals. It's checking. I noticed that, and then you give a concrete behavior that did not occur. I've noticed that this didn't happen.
Mm,
Help me understand. It's not
mhm.
not punitive. It's giving that employee the chance to self-correct. Maybe they just got sloppy. Maybe there really is something going on, but it gives that employee a chance to say, I screwed up, or it took me longer than I thought. I didn't budget my time well. Great. How
Mm,
can I help? There's what the employer, supervisor, manager can do. How can I help so that it doesn't happen next time? Or so
mm,
you don't get put in that stress. So I think it all begins with being proactive and doing those check-ins and having those conversations. And Raymond goes on in his book to talk about how the first one's the check-in, the second one's the mention, and then you get down to a point where you say we need to talk. But again, it's all based on concrete behaviors that the two of you agreed on earlier on.
and I
Where
think
we
that's the
get it.
hard part, though.
Yes,
I
yes, it
don't
is.
think
Yeah.
people, really do that. Like, I'm like that agreement of, if things aren't going the way expected, I'm going to hold you accountable or something like that.
Oh, God, can we back up a second? I love what you just
Mm,
said. What you just said, if things aren't going the way that we expected, I'm going to have to hold you accountable or something like that. See, I
mm,
think the accountability begins at the very beginning. I mean, I think it's establishing how do we work together well.
mm.
What do you need from me to deliver this work on time, and or to this
Yeah.
level, and then that person giving you what they think. They may not know yet, it may be new territory here, but giving you, okay, well, it'd be best if you checked in with me every week, or this happened, or
Mm,
that. Okay, great. And then you try that, but you don't let it go so far that you find out, ooh, that didn't work. I think I have to be, in communication enough to begin to see, as if you're their supervisor, yeah, I'm not sensing that they've got a good handle what's supposed to happen here. And you
Mm.
speak to that before it gets to crisis. Too often it gets to crisis and then everybody has to jump in, and that's not pleasant.
No, absolutely not. Um, but then I guess what trends are you seeing then with policies? So we're talking a little bit about, being able to take time off, but when you're talking about kind of that work life success and how work and personal lives kind of intersect, and employers have to stay across this in order to stay relevant. What other trends are you kind of seeing right now?
Sure. I don't think it's any surprise. I mean, the number one thing is that flexible work environment. What does this look like from number of days in an office, on site versus away, as far as working remotely, whatever that remote might mean for that individual. I think that's the biggest one that we're seeing. And then the second thing is how those teams do that. How do they carry it out if somebody's in the office and somebody's working remotely, and coming to agreement on how do we keep in good touch and or keeping good communication with each other while we're working through projects. And I think one of the things that happened was that we sometimes didn't ask enough of our remote employees to say, hey, we do need some stability, and when we meet, it can't just be haphazardly. We're going to have to do, this is what we need,
Hmm.
and getting their buy-in, and creating that expectation of that. So I think that's the other thing that we're seeing is these remote teams are figuring out, how to make that happen. And it was, if some are remote, some are in the office. The third thing I think is we're seeing a really big change in, just how people lead teams, how people supervise teams. You supervise someone differently. You lead and manage someone differently if they're in front of you versus if they're remote or is half a
Mm.
half a world away.
Hmm.
I think that's the other thing that we're seeing is that the same management approach doesn't work for both cases. You have to
Mm.
be aware that it requires different skills, different ways of working with those team members.
And the people who you've seen who are most successful in that, what kind of leadership attributes do they have, or what routines do they put in place?
Sure, sure. Let's start with the routines. I think the routines, of course, are just those regular check-ins, and they have consistent questions that they ask. Everybody's busy, and if you've
Mm.
got to try to figure out what your manager is going to be asking you about every week, and that's not effective. But if you know that your manager is going to ask you the same kinds of questions: what are your priorities for this week? Where are you feeling some pressure? How can I help? I mean,
Mm.
then you're ready when you meet with your supervisor, because you're ready. Okay, here's my priorities. Here's where I'm feeling some pressure, and here's how you can help me. I mean, it just makes those meetings go so much more efficiently. So I think those regular check-ins are just really key in that, as far as routines go. Now, you talked about attributes. I think the other one is as simplistic as it may sound, Jana, is being effective listeners.
Mm.
We are noticing that leaders and managers of today have got to be effective listeners, because um, people want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to be understood. In fact, that's the three things people want. They want to be seen, heard, and understood. And you've got to be willing to stop and have some conversations, to check in with people and listen to their answers. If you want their full engagement on the work, they want to know that you also are thinking about them as a human being. You might drive them with I guess the carrot of compensation or some other benefits for a while. That'll get old. And
Mm.
then people want to know, hey, I want to know that you value me as a human being, and the work I do. I just recently finished a coaching session with a client. In fact, it was today, where they were talking about that. They were talking about all the things they had accomplished in with their team, and hiring, and curriculum developed, and all these things. Their manager never spoke to any of that. But the first time this person asked for leave, on said, oh, well, don't you know you're supposed to be at that meeting? We really need you at that meeting. and they're like, they never said anything to me when I was telling about all the great things we were doing, but the first time I bring up an issue or a challenge, now they're all over me. So I think that's one of those things. It's just listening, being supportive of those team members is just so critical right now.
Absolutely. Um, and then what are your, I guess it's always timely to ask, what are your thoughts about the latest, the constant in the, in LinkedIn news and all of that about return to work or remote work and, and all of
It's such a complex, I won't say complicated. Complicated means it's hard. Complex means there's
that.
layers. And I really think that's what this whole return to work type of thing. The companies that we read about that are most successful are in touch with their team members and finding out what is it that they're looking for and what is possible to still get, to meet the goals that we have as an organization. And I think that, there's still some trial and error going on. And I think every team has to decide, for themselves. I don't think there's any company-wide policy that's going to meet all those the guidelines or the expectations or the needs of people. I think as much as possible, if that team knows the work that's expected to be done and they're clear about that, they've got their goals, they've got their projects, then I think the more autonomy an organization, senior leadership, et cetera, can give them, that, yeah, go get the work done. Exactly how it gets done, that's going to be your call. And I think there's got to be some, parameters in there, and we could, there's a ton of those. But I think the more we can get to that, I think that allows people to feel like they're valued for where they are in this season of life, what their needs are, and how they want to work.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Pink, I think it is, talks about the importance of autonomy over work, and but I guess the constant struggle, or the tension is between, not everybody can see what the right thing to do is over what I want to do. Because like it really drives me crazy, and I've said it on this show before. Sorry to the audience, but
well, I haven't heard it, so go ahead.
right. So that that everybody's like, oh, we proved during COVID that we can work remotely, and it's like, I don't know that we excelled during COVID. And don't get me wrong, our entire team works remote. I've worked remote since 2014, I think. But there's something that's lost when, like, for like certain things, and for our business, it's like we fly to client sites sometimes for, say, requirements gathering or testing or some of these critical moments where you need to bring everybody together, right? And so we've kind of identified for our business, what are those times where people need to be together, because it makes a difference. But when you're talking about, somebody with a brick and mortar building, and the company says, oh, we want people here 2 days a week or something, and people don't want to do it, because they're putting their wants over seeing, well, maybe there's value in me being at work. Like, do you see that, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I see. I think you said something really important, Jen, when you talked about your company. We identified those times that we need to be together. And if a company makes an arbitrary judgment that, yeah, people need to be in the office 3 days a week, do they or don't they? Is that a personal preference, or is it the business case? And you all made the business case. We need to be together at these times. And so I think the smart organizations and smart companies, whether it be large or small, have to start with the business case of, yes, this is why we need people in the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And if they do that, and I think if they make the case to people, then people are much more willing to engage with that and say, yeah, all right, I understand that. And maybe those people do that, and maybe they say, that's not what I want. And, maybe they go somewhere else. But I just see too often that we just say, we want people back in the office.
Hmm.
Why? Why?
Right.
Well, we're not getting work done. What's the work that's not getting done?
Hmm.
And sometimes folks can't articulate that because there's just a control thing. Because if I see them, I can assume they're doing work. I got to tell you this. Speaking of that, my daughter Sydney is in she's in an internship with an organization here in North Carolina. She contacted her older sister last week, and she said, "Yeah, I got a question." She said, "I've noticed that people working here like full time, is it normal for people to like stop their work and get up and go around and talk to people and leave for a few minutes?" Because Sydney thinks that when she logs in,
Yep.
she's you know,
That's
and
how I
and it was
was. Yeah.
right, and it was just eye opening to her that wow, even in the
Mm.
workplace where we talk about working, people are taking breaks, people are stepping away, people are looking at social media, people.
Well, but
So we
that's what like but there's value to that, which is what
oh
I
sure.
learned. Like I actually had to start putting it on a to-do list. Go talk to these five people
Yeah.
without having any agenda other than to
Hmm.
talk to them, because it was about building relationships.
Yeah.
Because I was
Yeah.
not very good at like I was all about work. No, I'm here to work. I clock in at this time. I get done at this time, and it wasn't about being a time puncher. It was about like just the focus on the work. I want to
Yeah.
get all my work
Yeah.
done in the time I'm supposed to get it done, so I can go home.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that we went down that
Hmm.
line of conversation
Hmm.
because of I think we have to evaluate what is it we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish
Hmm.
it. Like you said, culture comes into play. If our culture is this is a workplace where we support each other on those kind of things outside of work, or we support each other as human beings, or we have fun. I was talking with Jolly Time Popcorn last week, and one of their things is to about being a fun place to work.
Hmm.
We have to build those things in because that's who we are. That's part of the culture.
Hmm. So if companies wanted to start saying, you know, maybe we're old school and it's time for us to be more flexible or something like that. Like, what's that journey look like?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a number of ways to go about it. I think a well done assessment and employee, you can call it employee engagement survey,
Mm.
hiring a company, again, a management consulting company or someone, to help guide them through that, I think is a really
Mm.
wise thing to do, because you can make some knee jerk reactions that can cause more harm than good. So I think that's what the journey has to look like, is getting some data. Again, let's not just work off feelings. Let's work off of data. You know, let's get some information from our people. What are they thinking? What are they saying?
Mm.
What are they wanting? What are they looking for? What's our level of engagement? What could we do to improve that? And then once you have that information, then I think you can say, okay, what does that look like in our organization? What could we implement, roll out? What could we start doing? And you start
Mm.
small. You don't have to make seismic shifts in how your team gets work done, but maybe it is changing a policy on leave. Maybe it is saying you can work from home one day a week if you're in these departments or something. But it's starting small and then evaluating those changes, and then if they're working, hey, wow, yeah, we're seeing employee engagement go up, we're seeing productivity tick up. Okay, great, that worked. Yes, let's do more of that, or how do we expand the focus of that? But I think it starts with a really well thought out assessment or survey to find out where your people are, because you can assume You can read,
Mm.
you can read the Wall Street Journal or Business Insider or Forbes and go, oh, we need to do these three things and our company will be in touch with today's workforce. Maybe, maybe not, you know.
Mm. What are some of the pitfalls, like when people go down this journey? Like, do they go too far in another direction, or I mean, what's some of the things that
I
happen?
think, yeah, I think one of the pitfalls is, um, and I don't know I'm trying to think about how to say this, but I think when you aren't clear in what you're even thinking about doing, because remember, if people don't know the truth, they make it up. And so I
Mm.
think a lot of times when you start saying, we want to improve the work-life balance, we'll improve the work-life balance of our employees. What does that even mean?
Mm.
I think you can have some discussion, but we're looking at several different ways to help improve the work life success for teams, but we haven't come up with any policies or plans or procedures. So I think you have to manage what you communicate to the organizations, the people in the organization. I think that's one of the pitfalls, is that people might say, well, we're thinking about doing this. Well, when you say you're thinking about doing a specific plan, people don't hear the think part. They hear that you're going
Mm.
to do that. And then when you don't do it, then you have, created some mistrust there. Well, I thought you said you're going to do that. No, we said we were just considering it. Okay, well, now we're down to semantics, and that's never a good place to be when it comes to that. So I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls. You got to manage that communication. I think you've got to it's you've got to tie it into something bigger than you are. What is it we hear so much today about, the triple P bottom line: people, profits, and planet? you know
Mm.
you I think you gotta tie it into something bigger, so they understand this action we're taking is part of a bigger piece of who we are, or our identity as a company. So why wouldn't we do this? So I
Hmm.
think a failure to tie it into those bigger pieces is also another pitfall I see.
Mm. And when we've talked a lot about leave and PTO, or
Mhm.
sorry, leave and remote work. But what
Sure.
else? Like, you talk about, I know something important to you is employee, burnout, or avoiding employee burnout. So what are some of the other things employers can do to help with that?
Yeah. I think, and you and I were talking before the podcast today, and I was talking about this whole thing of mental wellness and just some of those things.
Mm.
I think we have to provide, or should want to. Let me rephrase that. I think we should want to provide, as leaders of organizations, provide opportunities for people to have psychologically safe spaces to speak up and to talk about
Mm.
potential burnout and different things. Now that's important, and also it's risky. I posted something on LinkedIn today about something related to mental wellness, and one of the people commented. They said, "I used to speak up, but then it got used against me."
Mm.
And they went on to talk about in very specific terms how they had confided something to a supervisor or a manager, and then it had gotten used later toward them, and they said, "I don't speak up anymore." And I get
Mm.
why, because it wasn't safe for them. And in the way I think that starts, Jana, is in helping, this whole idea of burnout and things, is leaders have to go first. Supervisors have to go first, and saying, I just wasn't feeling it when I came to work today. I
Mm.
have those days when it's a little bit of a push, because of A, B, C, D, E, and here's how I work through that. Or it's just been really tough. I mean, you can. There's a difference between being a vulnerable leader and leading with vulnerability. And I
Mm.
think that one of the ways we can help with some of this overload, the burnout, the stress, is that leaders be willing to say, "I don't have it all together." you know i i I miss my kids past couple of weeks because we've had this big project going on, and I miss seeing my kids, and spending time with them. But you know what? This weekend Don't anybody expect a text or an email from me, because I'm going to be hanging out at the pool with my kids and I'm looking forward to it. I mean, think about the
Mm,
message that says to your team is that, wow, they've made some sacrifices too. It stresses them, and they're planning to do, to do better, or not to do better, but whenever they've got the time now to be somewhere else, they're going to be there.
mm.
And so I think that can go a long way toward helping people be willing to speak up about issues of burnout and stress and overload.
What about those of us who maybe have no life outside of work because you just enjoy work, not because that's just who you are. Like sometimes I feel, like it sets, in some ways sets a bad example, like, and I'm one of those people, right? Like I work, probably 12 plus hours a day, probably
Mhm,
more than that,
mhm,
and I'll take a break to have, like, when my daughter gets home from school, to have
mhm,
dinner or whatever. But when she goes back to, does her homework or goes to a music
mhm,
lesson or whatever, I'm going back to work.
mhm.
And so people see me online all the time. What are your thoughts about about that?
Well, it works for you, right?
Right, but
And
but the
again, go ahead. What were you going to say, Jana?
I was gonna say, I just don't know how it looks to them.
Aha, that's it. And so I think you being comfortable explaining, hey, this works for me. In my
Mm,
current season of life, this works for me. You outlined it really well for me. My daughter goes, she has homework she has to go do in the evening. That frees up some space for me. You're passionate about what you do with work, and
mm.
that's the plan that works for me. I'm
Yeah.
listening to that going, not me. I mean, I might work. I might work 10 or 12 hours. Some days. But whenever 5 o'clock comes, I'm done. I mean, unless I'm going to an event or speaking or something like that. But I'm done, because I've got other
Mhm,
things that I want to do that fulfill me and are part of
mhm.
my purpose.
Right.
You would go nuts with some of those things because that's not you. And
Mhm,
again, I think it goes back to what's important to you. What are your
mm,
values? What are your priorities, and are you living in sync with them? And of course, that's a whole
mm.
nother conversation at some
Right.
point, but I think that's where you have to start, is that these are my
Mhm,
values, these are my priorities, this works for me. I don't expect you to do that. Now, a practical example: you might have a team of folks who you're working on something at 10 o'clock at night, and you fire out an email to all of them. That team of people could go, Jana's working at 10 o'clock. I'm not working at
mhm.
10 o'clock. Oh, I'm an utter failure. No,
Right.
you're the good manager who's going to say, I work late at night. I don't
Mm.
expect you to respond to that email till tomorrow morning. If it's
Yeah.
a dumpster fire, I'm going to call you. I'm sorry, I did the old person call. We do calls this way these days. Um, but I think that's the key, is being that good
Mhm,
manager who says, this is what works for me, and I don't expect you to do that. And when I do these things, I don't expect you to respond as I would, because I'm in a different place. And as long
right.
as we get the work done, got to come back to getting the work done. As long as we come back to get the work done, you do work your way, I'll do work my way, and we'll celebrate when it gets accomplished.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I'd love to hear what you wanna 3 things you wanna leave top of mind with folks.
Wow, that's just three. Let me see. Okay, the
Yep, just
first one
3.
is the first one is that um, and it's going to sound so cliche, but people people go about getting work
Mm,
done differently.
mm,
And as much as possible, we need to respect that and work with that cadence instead of trying to put everybody into a box. So I think
mhm,
the first one's, people approach work differently. I think the second thing is for organizations. Organizations have to make the business case for whatever plan they're going to develop related to work-life balance, remote work, flex scheduling. Make the business case for it, because if you're just doing it because, well, I think this is a good thing to do this month, it won't last. People will get mad, they'll get frustrated, and you won't continue to apply the resources behind it. I think the third thing is, I'd say this to the individual, and it's kind of like that last stuff that you and I talked about, is that I think people have to decide, what is it that I want from work? What am I trying to accomplish? What are my goals? I think you have to be more intentional about thinking about those things, because then you
Mm,
can backstep into, what does work need to look like? Remote versus on site, or whatever it might be. How do I want to spend my off work hours? I think people have to get clarity about that. People started
mm,
raising their hand and thinking about it whenever we, went through the pandemic, and I think some people made some shifts just out of some knee-jerk reactions, some of them. But I think we've got to get more, I won't say maturely
intentional.
intentional. Yeah, but I want
Mm,
to put something in front of that, Janet, but I don't know what it is. But I think we've
mm,
got consistently intentional. That's it. We got to get more
mm.
consistently intentional about the choices we make every day, so that when we're done with work, or when we're during the weekend, or spending time with our family, we're going, yeah, this is where I need to be right now, and I can enjoy it because I took care of that other stuff when I was in those other places.
Yeah, those are great points, Jones. I really appreciate that. Well, how can people find you, learn more about what you do, things like that?
Sure. Sure. Would love people to go visit jonesloflin.com. The spelling of my name, of course, will be in the show notes. And
Mhm.
so go there. You can check out some of my information and just a little bit more about me as far as a keynote speaker and coach. I also invite your listeners to follow or connect with me on LinkedIn. I put out a lot of content on LinkedIn related to leadership development, work-life success, mental wellness. And so I'd love for them to follow or connect with me there, and I get to learn from them too. As John, I think I could spend 8 hours a day on LinkedIn and be much smarter than I am now. But just because people post some really good stuff there, and I try to, learn from them as much as they learn from me. So that would certainly
Mm.
be the other place I would say for folks to go and find me.
And I'm sure they could find your books there as well
Absolutely. They can go to my
on your
store or
website.
Amazon. Anywhere books are sold. Books are available in hardcover as well as Kindle and ebook versions as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about a topic that will certainly 5 years from now, you're going to be having guests on that are going to be talking about the same thing, because it's going to take a while to figure this one out, and then it'll
Mm,
change.
yep. That's the only constant, right? Change.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.